Welcome back to Grad Futures Forum, hosted by the Princeton University Graduate School. And today's keynote is by Sophal, class of '97, on resilience and the futures of the PhD. In just a few moments, we'll be joined by James Van Wyck, Assistant Dean for Professional Development.
Good evening and welcome to day 4 of the Grad Futures Forum hosted by the Graduate School at Princeton University. As Neil mentioned, I'm James Van Wyck, an Assistant Dean for Professional Development, and it is my honor, my distinct honor, to host this afternoon's event with Professor Sophal. We're delighted you all could join us for the second year of this annual event. The Grad Futures Forum is now an expanded week-long professional development conference designed to meet the imperative of graduate student professional development. The forum also signals the graduate school's strong commitment to preparing PhDs for the future of work, to empowering them to envision and shape their own futures, and in so doing, broadening the impact of the PhD within and beyond the academy. The forum's 38 sessions and well over 60 speakers have all highlighted the range of futures open to graduate students. They've provided practical advice, they've shared inspirational stories, and perhaps most importantly of all, they've connected graduate students, graduate alumni, and leaders within and beyond academia. This conference, the Grad Futures Forum, would not have been possible without so many of you out there, including faculty, staff, graduate students. I want to thank in particular our support team from ISS, David Hopkins, Christian Calker, and Pete Nowak. But there have been so many of us have worked to make this event possible. And I'm very proud to say that so many of the participants and the creators of this event have been graduate students and graduate alumni. Speaking of which, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Sophal, who I'm hoping will join me on screen now. Hello, Dr. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you, James. Good to see you.
Oh, likewise. I'm going to begin with a more or less unconventional introduction of you, Professor and that's because in casting about for a phrase to describe your career, the best phrase I could come up with is that you are the Swiss Army professor. You do it all. And I think our audience members will begin to appreciate what I mean by that as I go through some of your bio. Not all, because we quite frankly want to get to hear your stories, your insights, and we also want to give time at the end for audience members to share questions they might have for you. And so in a moment, I'm going to ask our producer behind the scenes, Neil, to pull up your LinkedIn profile, because I actually think skimming through visually what it is that you've done over the past so many years since graduating in '97 from the School of Public and International Affairs to now when you are an associate professor of diplomacy and world affairs at Occidental College in Los Angeles. If this were a conventional bio, I would continue on to phrases such as this. You lecture on political economy, security, development, and Asia. Previously, you've taught how to rebuild countries after wars at the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School and International Development at the Maxwell School of Syracuse University. Now, here's where we start getting into the list. And Neil, maybe if you want to pop up Professor Ear's LinkedIn profile and just start scrolling. And I'm going to touch on a few highlights. In addition to doing scholarly work that is recognized at the highest levels, published in the best journals and by the best academic presses, Professor has consulted for the World Bank, was assistant resident representative for the United Nations Development Program in East Timor, a term member of the Council on Foreign Relations, an advisor to Cambodia's first private equity fund, Leopard Capital, the audit chair of the Nathan Cummings Foundation, and treasurer of the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center, a TED Fellow, Fulbright Specialist, and young global leader of the World Economic Forum. Professor also sits on the boards of Refugees International, the Board of Partners for Development, the Board of International and Public Management Network, the Southeast Asia Development Program in the Center for Khmer Studies. I need to take a break at this moment. He is the author of Aid Dependence in Cambodia, How Foreign Assistance Undermines Democracy from Columbia University Press in 2013, co-author of The Hungry Dragon, How China's Resources Question is Reshaping the World in 2013, and co-editor of the virtual issue of the journal Politics and the Life Sciences on Coronavirus, Politics, Economics, and Pandemics from Cambridge University Press in 2020. In addition, Professor Ear has written and narrated the award-winning documentary film The End/Beginning, Cambodia, based on his 2009 TED Talk, and has appeared in 4 other documentaries. Well, Professor Ear, I'm going to thank Neil for giving everyone what I hope was a helpful kind of overview of this profile. If you keep scrolling down, you see just how many roles you've taken on as, despite describing yourself as the accidental professor. Can you talk about why you call yourself the accidental professor?
Well, James, I'll say that I never intended originally to become a professor. I actually did everything I could not to be one. In fact, when I was doing my PhD, I said that I told Berkeley, where I did my PhD, that I didn't need to be a teaching assistant because I wouldn't ever become a professor. That's how convinced I was. In fact, I told, when I met professors who said, you should consider teaching, I totally dismissed that idea and thought that, who are they thinking? I've always been an introvert. I've never liked, never sought the limelight, speaking in public or doing anything that would draw attention to me. And so the idea of being a professor, somebody who earns a living from lecturing, from pontificating and teaching students, seemed so foreign and impossible that the fact that I ended up being a professor seemed completely accidental to me. I really walked into it without realizing after my PhD. And my advisor, dissertation chair, had said, you should try it out, see if academia is a thing for you. And he gave me 3 years. He said, your knowledge is going to be good for 3 years. If you don't join academia within 3 years, it might be too late. And so I thought, okay, fine, I'll try. I'll be a postdoc. And I can't believe somebody was willing to give me the chance, because I would have never given myself a chance, knowing the record I had, never had any experience teaching. So why would they let me walk into a classroom and teach? Which, of course, I apologize for those first students. I was terrible. I needed more experience, and they gave me that chance to learn from that experience. But it's been a totally accidental journey to academia. I was always planning to become, a World Bank young professional or economist at the IMF, or a young professional at the Asian Development Bank. I always envisioned myself to be in international development, and suddenly after having had, similar experiences in the UN development program, to then get the chance to become an academic seemed like a golden opportunity. And now, of course, it's been over a decade, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. And I want to say that we have a lot of resources that we're going to share during and after this talk about Professor Ear, including a Paul article about resilience. But the Paul article begins as your TED Talk ends, with a focus on your mother. Can you just talk briefly about your personal backstory? And being a first-gen graduate student is probably an understatement to describe you as a first-gen undergraduate, but you're also a first-gen professor in a field, as we've just learned in a recent study, that is quite a few tenured professors have a lineage of professorship. In other words, their parents, sometimes even grandparents, were on the tenure track. Your story has a little bit of a different origin to it. You want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. And I'll say, the ultimate imposter syndrome is really that person that you're looking at, the person who was never at all seeing himself as a professor, never thought of himself as scholarly, never believed that I could, even graduate high school. I mean, we're talking about first generation. It's first generation, really high school graduate. I am originally from Cambodia, and I was born right after the Khmer Rouge took power. Right before the Khmer Rouge took power, and so the Khmer Rouge killed a quarter of the population, causing a genocide of 1.7 million people dead. And my father and mother and 4 siblings and I were all living in the capital city, Phnom Penh, when the Khmer Rouge won on April 17th, 1975. And so they emptied the cities. They told us that, Americans would be bombing Phnom Penh and we needed to get out. And an exodus of almost 2 million people resulted in that. And so we went off to the believing that it was temporary. We didn't even pack our bags, but for a 3-day journey, thinking we'd be back in 3 days. Instead, they sent us to the countryside to work the land. And my father died as a result, of dysentery and malnutrition. But before he did, the Khmer Rouge said that Vietnamese citizens could return to Vietnam. And so my mother, who spoke a little bit of Vietnamese, convinced my father that she could, with him, pretend that we were all Vietnamese. The only problem was my father didn't speak any Vietnamese, so how would he have proven that he was Vietnamese? And it was my mother's really will and determination to save her kids that led her on this journey of lying about her citizenship, her identity, so that we could have a chance to get out from under the Khmer Rouge. And 3 days into the journey, my father passes away, so he's not ever put to the test in that sense. There's never a Sophie's choice of what would we do, because at the testing site, when my mother actually was administered there were 2 tests, but when she was administered these, if some folks, husband and wife, husband wasn't Vietnamese, couldn't pass the test, they were told then you can either stay together in Cambodia, where they in all likelihood die, or the wife can leave and go to Vietnam. And in that case, the husband and wife stayed back, and God knows what fate they suffered. But my mom, speaking a little bit of Vietnamese from her childhood, was able to basically fake her way through. In the first exam, it was the Khmer Rouge, so there was not too detailed of an exam. And then in the second exam, it was Vietnamese cadres, and there she was very fortunate. She was given some advice from an auntie who told her that the names you've given to the kids, they're wrong. You've given boys' names to all the girls and girls' names to all the boys. And so she quickly changed all the names. She had given them Vietnamese names, but they were misgendered, and so she changed all the names. The Vietnamese auntie acted as drill sergeant for her for the next 3 days, basically drilling her in the backwoods somewhere to improve my mother's Vietnamese. And when she did take the test, she was able to pass it. And so we were safe. But of course, we were safe from what? We were safe from the Khmer Rouge, only to be taken to Vietnam, which was then already a communist country. And unless you had relatives in Vietnam, you would be sent to the new economic life there, which was basically the same as living under the Khmer Rouge. It was sort of this communal life that was very sparse. Thankfully, I had an aunt in Saigon, which had been renamed Ho Chi Minh City. Somehow word got to her because my mom met an old friend of hers in the market one day. She had 7 days to find a relative, and she met this friend, told her, go tell, my sister's husband that we're here. And he was Vietnamese. That's why my aunt lived in Vietnam. So he comes down on a boat to rescue us in the middle of the night from the site, the camp, the detention camp the Vietnamese had kept us in, to basically bring us to Ho Chi Minh City, where we would then live the next couple of years. And even then it wasn't enough. Of course, for my mother, the moment she arrived in Vietnam, she declared that we were not Vietnamese, we were Cambodians, and knowing that they couldn't kick us back to Cambodia. So it gave us the opportunity then to then immigrate from Vietnam. Most, all the Vietnamese could only get out through as boat persons, to get on boats and try their luck in the open seas, and we didn't have to do that. We flew on a plane out to France, and eventually I immigrated to the United States after living 7 years in France. But it's a long story. I don't want to take all the time about it. But I was a refugee. I still consider myself a refugee. Mentally, I have the suitcase next to the front door, ready to go in case something happens. You can never be too sure about your good fortune, and I think having that mental state, although it's very taxing and causes a lot of anxiety, allows you to be ready for terrible outcomes that aren't maybe so wonderful, but you're more resilient as a result, and you're able to move forward when you have a setback.
That's just remarkable, and I encourage everyone to indeed check out the TED Talk, check out the Paul article. In researching and prepping for our talk, we initially had a conversation that was very similar to this, where we kind of just went back and forth and had a conversation about leadership, mentorship, the professoriate, and many other things. And that led me to also do a little bit of digging into your background. And it's nice because you've won a range of awards, and when you win awards, they often do these profiles. And so in reading these profiles, I've come to know quite a bit about your background, quite a bit about your habits as a professional, the way you operate as a connector. But what really strikes me, and maybe this will resonate with you, is that you have, perhaps due to the story you've just shared with us, or parts of which you've just shared with us, your scholarship is done on purpose for a purpose. It's not abstract ideas. You kind of rarely end with theory. It's always kind of got an application. I want to talk a little bit about that and how you see the relationship between scholarship and practice.
Sure. And look, I mean, maybe it's because I'm not I'm not a theorist, in the sense of I don't want to think about things in terms of only theory, but rather I want to see how theories can help improve lives, right? So you begin maybe your research with a theoretical foundation, but in the end, I care about not how many books sit on shelves, and you see my books back here, but really how my books can impact ideas, right, and change the world. And the fact that the aid dependence in Cambodia book, for example, ended up being used in a congressional bill on Cambodia really meant for me that the ideas that I proposed in it, that maybe having too much aid dependence caused countries to no longer care about their citizens, lack accountability, and listen more to donors, might be something that we could change going forward and improve upon. So that's one idea. I think that if scholarship is devoid of impact in the real world, then it's what good is it for? I mean, I value, of course, knowledge. It's important, but I want to certainly make an effort as somebody who writes for a living on topics involving Cambodia, governance, aid dependence, how to rebuild countries after wars, how one might be able to make things better through proposing ideas or analyzing the facts on the ground to encourage different policies or changes in governance, certainly in the end, fighting for human rights, democracy, and freedom, which I think are the things that over time I pray are improving, right? That we're getting more human rights, more democracy, more freedom as a result of human development and human evolution, instead of less human rights, less democracy, and less freedom.
That's really compelling. I think one of the other things that I noticed as a through line in your story is the ability to be an advocate for your own work, and recognizing that in many stages of your career, you are your own spokesperson. We're joined today by a lot of graduate students. Oftentimes, the culture of academia kind of instills maybe a reticence to toot one's own horn, but it's absolutely necessary, particularly when you want to make a change, as you have just so eloquently articulated. So maybe just talk a little bit about advice you would give to graduate students about self-advocacy, sharing your work, being your own spokesperson, so to speak.
Right. And I, as somebody who's introverted, there is, I think, a pre-built or innate view of oneself that does not put oneself at the center of attention. I don't seek necessarily the limelight, but I do think that being an advocate of your own ideas, insofar as, using social media or using, you've published an article, you've published a book, why not give book talks? Why not promote the ideas from the book and the ideas, or when I'm quoted in the press, for example, I share every instance of, I did the work. I, bothered to provide the quote to the journalist, which will happen on an almost daily basis. So it's time consuming, but what it does is you become a credible sort of source of information. So you kind of have a loudspeaker that allows you to change, whether it's perception or the reality of the situation, by commenting on it and bringing attention to it. It's really valuable. Okay. I mean, I'm not going to be able, I care about Cambodia, for example. I'm not going to be able to necessarily snap my finger and make more democracy happen. But if I continuously bring attention to the fact that there's a problem with the lack of democracy there, the abuse of human rights, and the decline in freedom, that will put pressure on those who are in power to not maybe make things worse as a result. So in the sense that, you, and my wife is always telling me this, she says, stop promoting your stuff online and so on. And I feel like I don't want to be seen certainly as somebody who's, this is all about me and so on. It's not. It's about the ideas that I promote and trying to give them a space in the conversation and a life that would continue beyond just today's newspaper, which becomes wrapper for fish tomorrow, right? So that's that. I realize that. I realize that you're in the cycle today. Tomorrow something else is happening. You're no longer in the cycle. But at least at that moment, the opportunity to bring some conversation about the topic to bear, to raise hopes for individuals who can't speak for themselves. That's the value of it, right? To be able to give them a chance, because they're behind, a firewall that won't allow them to that will identify them, that can get them arrested. If I can give them voice, that's very important to me.
That's really compelling, and just really, I want to thank you for sharing that. And let's pivot a little bit, because in our exchanges back and forth on the phone and on Zoom, we've shared resources with each other. And I think if what we were doing was to be technical about it, we were networking. But networking has an almost it's almost universally reviled as a concept within academia. In other words, we kind of worry about being seen as too transactional in how we would approach relationships with other people. But I was just struck by the way we connected. And as I was also looking at your own personal professional journey from organization to organization, and I can surmise at least that some of the opportunities beget or led to the other opportunities. And more often than not, it was probably through the node of a personal connection rather than a formal application to join all of these various organizations that we scrolled through for a while earlier in this talk. So I guess I'm heading toward a question, which is, in a moment of extreme disconnection, how do you view networking or making connections as an academic, as someone who also has their hands in all of these other kinds of organizations?
Yeah, James, I'm shaking my head in agreement because I feel very much that everything has a reason and leads up to a certain outcome, right? So the fact that I ended up on the board of the Nathan Cummings Foundation, a Jewish foundation with an endowment of $450 million, I never thought I would ever be part of a foundation like that. Well, 6 years, almost 7 years. How did I even get there? It was because I was a young global leader of the World Economic Forum, and another YGL was on that board, and then recommended me among other YGLs to be considered for as an independent trustee of NCF's board. And then I was interviewed, and it was an incredible connection. But how did I even get to be a YGL? Well, it's probably because I was a TED fellow, and that gave me a lot of credibility. And how did I become a TED fellow? It was because I lived in Monterey. I was flying back to Monterey one day, and I'd been upgraded to business class. I never pay for it, but I was upgraded. I was lucky that day. And next to me was a gentleman, Bud Enright, who somehow we started talking, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to this conference that has Al Gore there. It's going to have David Dollar, or it's going to have Paul Collier speaking." And I thought, wow, these people are coming to Monterey. What conference is this? He said, it's called the TED conference. And he told me, it's thousands of dollars to get in. I thought, oh, there's no way I'll ever get in. I don't have the money for that. Then the next year, Bud told me about a TED Fellows program they were launching. He wasn't part of the program. He wasn't part of TED, other than the fact that he was a TEDster, somebody who attended TED. And next thing you know, I'm applying for it, and I get picked by some miracle. I guess it was because TED was impressed that I'd published in the New York Times a Lives article about my family story, the escape of my mother and my siblings and I from Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge. And so I thought, okay, wonderful. Now I'll get to be part of this. And I got to give my TED Talk as a result. I became, the documentary that you mentioned earlier in the introduction was made subsequently because somebody watched a TED Talk and then decided, we should make a documentary. And so I got to write that documentary. But everything, if you think about it, goes from one step to the next. Even my attending Princeton, the School of Public and International Affairs, I was walking around at Berkeley as an undergraduate. I saw this flyer on the wall talking about the Public Policy and International Affairs Fellowship. There was a return postcard for different junior summer institutes. So one was at Princeton, another was at Berkeley, and I checked off for both, thinking, Princeton is near New York. I would love to, go there. But in reality, in the back of my mind, I thought I would never go to Princeton because I was a California guy. I had never left home. I'd never even flown by myself, much less. And so that was, one of the incredible opportunities was Berkeley rejected me. The Berkeley JSI rejected me. Princeton took me, and Wardell Robinson Moore, who was an associate dean at the school, said, everything will be fine. You can come. We'll take care of you. And so I took a plane. I arrived at Newark. They were there waiting for me on a shuttle bus, and I had my first ever experience. And from there, I'd say everything happens for a reason, but everything, I think, leads to something, right? So then that led to my MPA, which led to getting to work at the World Bank. And that job was because a second year MPA student remembered that when I was a first year, I had volunteered. I had just advertised that I would help whoever showed up at the computer lab to make a homepage on a certain day at a certain time. I would just show you how to write in HTML and create your own homepage. This was like 1995, I want to say. And she remembered. And when an opportunity came up at the World Bank for knowledge management, she thought of me. And so she said, hey, you should apply because I'm part of that team. And so I can't believe it. But she told her boss that I was good and so on. And I ended up at the bank, and it was a dream come true because during that summer, the JSI summer, I was asked, what do you want to do later in life? And I said, I'd like to be a governor at the World Bank, not realizing that governor of the World Bank meant being the finance minister of a country, because those are who ends up being those are the governors of the World Bank. But just the idea of getting to work there for 3 years, which was the experience of a lifetime, really opened up everything for me. Now, again, because of people and opportunities along the way, everything builds up for a reason. And I'm really an example of that. And it's, the angels that have helped me along the way. So to your point about connections, networking, I never thought I was networking, but for some reason it resulted in the outcome that very network is how I became the person that I am. And I'm not a particularly effective networker. I just think I know a lot of people. Let's see if I can connect people together. Maybe they'll think of me if an opportunity comes up.
Yes, and I think unstated in what you just shared, this one thing leading to the other came out in flashes. So you said, a year later, Bud, let me know about the TED Fellowship. More than likely, you had been maintaining that connection, finding occasions to connect and be in touch. And so I think fostering those connections and being intentional about doing so is a consistent hallmark in people who end up having the kinds of, the width and the breadth of opportunities that you have been able to take advantage of. And as you say, you put yourself out there, you stated your goals, you were also a servant leader. I think you and I, one of the concepts we kind of bonded around was the idea of servant leadership. And as we kind of pivot to questions from graduate students after this riff, perhaps, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that moment where you said, I'm going to be in the library. If you want to make a webpage, I'm going to sit here with you and help you do it. That led to something else beyond you doing that act of service. But it also was an end in itself. It was an act of servant leadership. You were in your way, probably more introverted then. You probably, if you told yourself then you were about to go on to a career of being on stage, giving talks and being a professor, you might have again had a moment of disbelief. But you were in a way doing a very effective method of networking, which is connecting and serving. And so I wonder, based on our mutual respect for Stephen Greenleaf's seminal essay on servant leadership, if you want to talk a little bit about how that kind of informs your approach to what it is you do.
Sure, yeah. And look, servant leadership has the word servant before leader, right? So it's about serving, not about necessarily saying I'm the leader and so you're going to listen to me. And I'm probably the least alpha personality person in that I'm not out there saying I'm the person you've got to listen to because I know everything. Oh gosh, no. I feel very much that service is about giving, and when you are helping somebody through that service, you are also helping them to become wiser, to become more independent, and to be able to think for themselves, right? So that they can become servants themselves. That example, I didn't realize it, but you're absolutely right, James. The fact that I, for some reason, decided that I was going to show people how to do HTML, and thinking back, I have a tendency to always try to bring people together. So then after that summer, I created a list. And I kept emailing everybody. I wanted people to get in touch and to stay in touch with each other from that summer. And so, and really, it was a bit selfish in that I knew I was going to go to the Woodrow, to the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs, and I knew that I wanted my friends to be there because I felt like the more of us are there, the more it'll feel like that summer again. So how to convince them? Well, we've got to keep them in the list. And that year, more students from that summer got accepted than ever. I think it's an example of, and we're still in touch to this day. We're still saying hellos on Facebook and continuing our conversations. But the amazing thing about all of that is that those friendships remain, And it's not because I wanted to mine the network and get something out of it, but rather I just wanted to bring people together. Sure, I get to be the one who sends the email and the updates on how things are going and so on, hence the title of class agent. I have to wring money out of my classmates from the class of 97 MPA, but it is, I think, a huge privilege and an opportunity to stay in touch, not necessarily to get anything back and forth, from a overt standpoint, but certainly when you stay in touch, your conversations continue, and then things happen. Just as you said, with meeting the gentleman butt end right on that plane, if I had cut off all contact and never said hello to him again, he would never have contacted me. Instead, we were just, he was a 60-plus-year-old gentleman, and I was 20, maybe 30 years old. What kind of common things would we have had? But I just thought, hey, he's a nice guy. He seems to take an interest in me. He had no idea that I had anything interesting to say. I mean, I told him perhaps the story of how I was a Cambodian refugee and so on, but I hadn't given my TED talk. There was no reason necessarily for that to happen, but we both invested in each other, and it's been incredible as a result, right? So I'd say those opportunities can come in an airplane, as happened with Bud. It's happened in an airport where I met the actor Sam Waterston, who played in The Killing Fields. I met him at LAX. He was just done shooing away some folks who wanted to take a picture with him. And I thought, I've got to tell him his role in The Killing Fields was monumental for Cambodian worldwide, to highlight the plight of Cambodian refugees in the killing fields. And after speaking about 15 minutes, he said, oh, you should come to this event of Refugees International, and we'll have it in Beverly Hills at United Talent Agency. Oh, wow. I've never been to these places. Anyways, I go there. He says, bring your students, bring, colleagues. So I brought a bunch of my students, a colleague. And from there, I posed a question to another, because he was on the board of RI. I posed a question to another member, the chair of Refugees International. Hey, do you have any refugees on your board? I think you should have refugees. Maybe I could be on your board, et cetera. A couple of years later, I'm on the board of RI. I mean, it's really not because I, thought I want to get on the board of RI before I've met Sam. I didn't know RI. I learned that Refugees International was born out of the Indochinese refugee crisis, the boat people, and the Cambodian genocide. And so it was so meaningful to me to close that loop of, wow, this organization was created to help people like me, and now I'm on the board of RI, trying to help the organization help another generation of refugees. Because after all, we're, a country of immigrants and refugees, and it's so important not to forget that that's the strength of our country.
Well said. And I think bringing that perspective as a refugee with a PhD into a board must just be an unparalleled resource for them. So oftentimes boards are more interested about representation. You have the experience of a refugee, plus having studied it for years and years and years, and just I can only imagine what you're like in a board meeting. Would love to be a fly on the wall listening in. Thanks for sharing that. We're going to go now to a few questions from the audience. A question from Sophie. How did you navigate through the early period of the professoriate?
Well, it's just like, imagine a first generation college student doesn't know the language that's used, doesn't know the ins and outs, and the fact that office hours are where you go to actually get the inside scoop on a course, avoids office hours. It was hard. Like that job. I was an assistant. Well, first I was a postdoc at the Maxwell School of Syracuse University, and then an assistant professor of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School. But those first few years were hard. It was learning the process of behaving in a new setting. It's not like a normal job. Some of the advice I got from tenured faculty members, full professors, was just go to the faculty meetings, go to the department meetings, keep your head down, and go back to your office and continue typing. Typing meaning the book that you're writing or the articles that you're about to publish and so on. Like, just focus on your own work. And I think that was important advice. That advice actually came from a colleague who would go on to become the head of the American Enterprise Institute, Arthur Brooks. And I can't believe, I worked with him and he helped me with my job talk subsequently. But these are the things that nobody tells you about, right? These are the things that are essentially unspoken, and you're just trying to make it to that next level, right? You're trying to get through to the 6-year evaluation of your tenure so that you can be tenured. And thankfully, by going on the job market, I was able to get opportunities that weren't available up until that point. I was able to get offers at different universities, but also knowing, to go back to your dissertation chair, as I did when I first got offers from certain universities, and I said to him, should I take these? Because I seem to be not so happy with what's being offered. And he said, no, say no and remain in the job market for another year. This was already like the 6th year of my assistant professorship, and he was telling me, take a chance and keep plugging away. And that's when the opportunities came. And even the job that I have now at Occidental College, it's because my wife was reading my emails and said, oh, the World Economic Forum is inviting you to go to Myanmar, Burma. And I said, oh, yeah, I know about that. They're not offering enough money for even to buy a plane ticket. I'm not going to bother with that. And then she said, oh, but they're also paying for the hotel and so on. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'll go. And that's when I met a colleague who taught at Occidental College, a future colleague, who was a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. And we connected. He's a refugee from Uganda, South Asian, and we just clicked. It was just amazing. And so he said, you should apply for Occidental College. Next thing you know, I'm there now for almost 7 years. So it's really kind of these incredible things that, having that mentor to help you along the way, serving in a two-way street where it's not just, that servant leadership aspect of it, where the leader is also a servant, and the person that he or she is helping is also helping that leader. It's such a conversation and again, a two-way street that isn't all about top down, or I have the answers, I'm going to serve you and you're not going to serve me at all. No, it's about also accepting that I can learn, and I have thankfully learned, and that this colleague is who ended up moving elsewhere, but is also helping, and I'm helping him as well.
Yeah, a common theme of this week has been the importance of mentorship, having a board of mentors, a board of advisors, cultivating mentors from a broad range of backgrounds, but also making sure that you just have many people who can give you input, can give you guidance, can give you support, can open up opportunities for you. Another, you're kind of tying in actually to another theme. We had a session earlier today with Dr. Jess Calarco, whose book, A Field Guide to Graduate School, Navigating the Hidden Curriculum, has been really important, I think, for some of the first generation graduate students at Princeton. But the hidden curriculum hurts everyone, right? And also the hidden advantages that exist for those who are perhaps not first gen, have family members who are also in academia. And so I think the idea is to kind of open it up, explore some of our assumptions about what people know, what they don't know, and making sure that we're making connections along the way and asking questions and asking for help and asking the right people for questions at the right time. So it sounds like you've made an excellent habit of that. We had a question earlier, I believe it was about international graduate students. Yes, here we are. So a questioner asks, what advice do you have for international graduate students who are uncertain of their futures? Key question, key demographic in graduate education, of course. So many graduate students at Princeton are international graduate students. I think last year our percentages were 43% of our graduate students were international graduate students. facing challenges on top of those faced by graduate students who have U.S. residency. Can you talk a little bit about international graduate students in this moment?
Yeah, and I think thankfully we've turned the corner on, I think, the unwelcome mat that was out in terms of that, but I think these are challenging times in a labor market that has clearly not been so friendly towards that demographic. But I would say, chasing your dreams, thinking about what it is you want to do, and working on it, whether it's in the United States or in a third country, not your own, or at home, allows you to gives you those options. I mean, the number one thing I would say is, if you can think about what it is that would make you happy in terms of using your education, giving you a passion for the things that you do, that whether it's in the United States or in your home country or in a third country, that's the important point of all of this, right? I mean, if you can find a career, whether academia or industry, that you can say, even if I weren't paid for this, I would do it. That's the holy grail. And those of us who've found that are so grateful to have found that, because that's really that's what anyone would hope for, right? To wake up and be passionate about the work that you do to that level. I know it's you're starting out, especially coming out of grad school. As an international student, there are visa issues, there's OPT, there's limitations on the number of years you can stay. But I think with a lot of resourcefulness and the connections that are made through, whether it's Princeton or whichever university you're attending, these are the opportunities. There are opportunities out there, and they can be found. I just think, obviously be realistic about them, and always have plans in mind about whether this works, or what would be plan B, plan C, and so on. It's hard. I will say that much as somebody who's a U.S. citizen who doesn't have to worry about being told to leave the country because your visa is running out or your OPT is running out. That's such a challenge and an added pressure, and I really empathize with those in that situation.
Yeah, certainly. I also want to acknowledge the fact that you've indicated on your profile on the GradFUTURES website that you're open to being contacted for informational interviews by Princeton graduate students. That openness to share, to connect, I think for most of us who are fortunate enough to be in positions where one thing leads to the next, as you've kind of intimated, it's often because we've put ourselves out there, we've connected, and sometimes it's those initial connections that are hardest to make. So availing yourself of your graduate alumni networks, or of your undergraduate alumni networks, of your peer networks, making sure people know what it is you're looking for. It can only help you find what you're looking for. We are rapidly approaching the 5 o'clock hour, and I would be remiss if I did not comment on your sartorial game, which is very, very high. And I do have to say, though, it did force me to make an adjustment in my own choice of clothing, given that I had planned to wear white shirt, blue jacket, and the Princeton tie. But kudos to you for I think they do Zoom Raider rooms. We'll do a StreamYard Raider room, and this is 10 out of 10. Books in the background, Princeton pin, Princeton tie, and just it's been an absolute delight to connect with you. I hope people have taken away from this conversation your heart for committed scholarship, applied scholarship that is rooted in purpose, has an impact within and beyond academia. When I approached you to talk at the GradFUTURES Forum, you said, I'm a professor, right? And of course, we are interested in careers within and beyond academia. And increasingly, I don't know if you would agree with this, but increasingly it seems to me that there are much more fluid borders between previously impermeable membranes, so that careers in and outside of academia might be a little bit of a misnomer, in that we might think about careers that bridge, careers that move between fields that are immediately adjacent to higher ed and then back into a professorship. Ann Kirshner, who's speaking later this week, is one of the primary examples of somebody who's gone about as far afield from academia as you can to the NFL, and is now back at CUNY Graduate Center. So I'm really just delighted that the forum, Grad Futures, your willingness to connect as a graduate alum has put us in touch, has put Grad Futures in touch with you, has put you on the map as a resource for Princeton graduate students. And your story, your commitment, your abilities, your kind of natural disposition to do networking, even from the vantage point of a self-avowed introvert, really provides a compelling model for Princeton graduate students. And I'm so glad that we could have you speak for this hour to Princeton graduate students, to share your insights, to share your experiences, tell a little bit about your strategies that you take. And I encourage Princeton graduate students, if you haven't done so already, create a LinkedIn profile, check out Sophal's profile, connect with him, and touch base and reach out and find those shared areas of connection where you can collaborate and connect and build something together. Because I think there's no greater joy than to take a degree like the PhD and have it have a significant, fundamental, and lasting impact on this world. And I don't think we can ask too much more out of a career. So again, we'll end with the LinkedIn profile. Yes, professors are on LinkedIn, especially Swiss Army knife professors. So with that, Sophal, thank you so much. We'll run now the ticker that will show the upcoming events for this evening. But once again, if we were in person, a big round of applause for Dr. Sophal here. And
thank you.
Our deep thanks for sharing your time, your story, and most importantly, your profile and your network with Princeton graduate students.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It's been an honor. Neil, if you don't mind, we can run the upcoming events on the bottom of the screen. And I want to thank everyone. Please do join us at 5 p.m. for Transitioning from Graduate School to Entrepreneur, Lessons Learned from Successful Founders. This is with two undergraduate alums, Jim Cohen and Mark Poag, who run Fitsgate Ventures. And then tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we will have national coalition efforts to promote graduate student professional development. And tomorrow is the last of the 5 days of packed programming for graduate students, faculty, staff, and those who support graduate students. Thanks, everyone, very much. And I wish you all a lovely evening.